So in the next paragraph, Kant turns to that very issue. And I'll read a little bit here, and he weighs in on another major issue in education. Quote, "One often hears it said that we should put everything before children in such a way that they do it from inclination." Right? Now, what is it to say that students will have things put before them in such a way that they will do it from inclination? Well, one approach to education is to say that what we should do is try to have students naturally motivated to play upon their natural motivation, their natural curiosity, their natural desire to explore. And so education, in part, consists of putting attractive things in front of them, waiting for them to show an interest, and then once they show interest, to facilitate that and to piggyback various lessons on that. All right, and that is the position then that Kant is reacting to, and he is saying that is not what education should consist in. I'm making heavy weather of this point right now because Kant has in mind the thinker John Locke, whom he has read, an earlier thinker by about a century. Locke is coming from the realist tradition, which we'll be considering in the next unit, and here is Kant's then response to Locke and disagreeing with him and those others who believe in the inclination and self-motivation approach here. Kant goes on to say, and again, quote, "In some cases it is true, and that's all very well, but there is much besides which we must place before them as duty." And a duty, again, stepping outside of the quote, is something that you do whether you are inclined to do it or not. It's not a matter of whether you want to or not. It's a matter of something that you have to do, that you are supposed to do, and your proper motivation is a dutiful motivation. Kant then goes on to explain why, quote, "And this will be of great use to them later throughout their life. For in the paying of rates and taxes, in the work of the office, and in many other cases, we must be led not by inclination, but by duty." And notice here that Kant has sketched out most of the major areas of life, our political life, our life in paying taxes, our life at work, right, and so forth. Life is primarily about duty. It's about having obligations, grown-up responsibilities. There's not a lot of time for pleasure and inclination and doing whatever you happen to feel about. That's not what adult life is like. That's not what the moral life is like. Life is about duty and obligation, and the sooner children learn this lesson, the more the better, rather, their education is going to be. All right, so Kant then goes on to consider what is likely to happen next. We have this strict schedule that we are putting on students. We're trying to teach them discipline. We are putting lots of duties and obligations upon them, but naturally this is not something that they want to do. Children being children, human beings being human beings, what's going to happen next? Well, there's going to be lots and lots of disobedience. We are disobedient creatures. We are a sinful creature. We are a willful inclination kind of creature. We don't obey, and Kant then takes up this subject. Quote, "Every transgression of a command in a child is a want of obedience, and this brings punishment with it. Naturally, sin, the consequence is punishment. Disobedience requires punishment, and so Kant now takes up the subject of punishment in the educational context, and for several pages, it must be said, Kant goes into great detail in the different kinds of sins and punishments that students will engage in, and the appropriate kinds of punishments that are appropriate for all of those subcategories of sin and disobedience. And so this is something then that is meant for teachers to take under advisement, looking for all of the kinds of disobediences that are going to happen, and having ready a repertoire of punishments that are appropriate for the kind of obedience, or disobedience rather, that is involved. All right, after several pages of discussing all of the disobediences that children are going to engage in and the various kinds of punishments that are appropriate, Kant steps back a little bit and realizes the kind of picture that he is painting here. He's not an extreme by any means in terms of the pessimism of his view of human nature and the amount and severity of punishment that he thinks is necessary in an idealist school. And so he issues a kind of a qualification or a cautionary note. And so I want to read just one more passage to you. It's one that struck me when I read it for the first time. as I think it goes a long way to giving a sense for how Kant speaking for not only himself but many people in the idealist tradition, what school, or what the feeling of being in school is like, and perhaps some of us can relate to this as well. Kant says in this passage here, quote, "Children should sometimes be released from the narrow constraint of school. Otherwise, their natural joyousness will soon be quenched." So he recognizes that children are naturally joyous creatures, and he doesn't think that's an entirely bad thing. But nonetheless, school is not a place where there's going to be much room for natural childish joyousness. And so the indication here seems to be joyousness and having fun and being a child, that's fine. We'll make a place for that, but that's not what school is for. School is a very different kind of place. School is serious business. School is about focus. It's about discipline. It's about strictness. It's about obedience. It's about duty. And that is what we are about when we are in school. But we don't want to destroy the child's natural joyousness entirely, so we should build in some recess, some lunch breaks, and have after-school activities so as not to totally quench that spirit. Okay, that's all I want to do in the case of Kant. There's a great deal of more in Kant's lectures on education. In this case, I wanted to focus a little bit more on the ethics of idealist education as represented by Kant, and see the connections in terms of the issue of punishment, compulsion, and top-down authoritarianism that goes all the way back to Plato. And certainly if we have any familiarity with traditional religious schooling, there are commonalities in that approach to schooling as well. That is idealism philosophically as applied to education.